Guys, welcome to another episode of the Combat Veteran Breakdown. I am Paul, combat veteran, MMA fighter, and YouTuber. And I guess I'm also a podcaster because this is also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and a bunch of other podcast distributors I haven't heard of. But today, right, I wanted to take a look at one of those questions that I get every so often, and a lot of the experiences when I was deployed, right, things that were incredibly routine, people still ask me about. And I realized that, even simple stuff is interesting to people, right? So one of the questions I get sometimes is what was your mission planning cycle? What did that look like in general? And I'm not going to get too technical, right? There's, of course, the they call it the TLPs, the troop leading procedures, right? There's an acronym for everything, but this is kind of the broad base of what our sort of operation cycle looked like as a platoon leader in Afghanistan. So for a little bit of context, I was the platoon leader for the entire 12 months of my deployment of a military police platoon in RC East in Nangarhar province. And military police platoons are exceptionally large by Army standards. There are 40 soldiers. That's actually the size of a cavalry unit company. So we're really looking at a much, much larger element than most platoon leaders deal with. And because you have 40 soldiers, and at the time, the U.S. Forces Afghanistan regulation was that you, with a tiny number of exceptions, cannot leave the wire with less than 16 soldiers. And that was basically a regulation to make sure that you had enough people that even if you took a fair amount of casualties, you could still fight and recover and, extract yourselves from a bad situation. You could kind of self-support. And that's actually a pretty good rule. There were a couple of exceptions for very small sort of teams and I imagine some special forces, counterterrorism type stuff. But even those guys would usually come to play in force. So given that regulation, we ended up with two maneuver elements, two 20-person elements that could actually leave the wire and do missions simultaneously. So as a platoon leader, right, having two independent maneuver elements was a significant change from what I was trained, right? I was trained that usually platoons maneuver and fight together and that you don't have to deal with separate elements doing separate missions simultaneously until you're at that company commander level. But you adapt pretty easily to that sort of thing. So generally what would happen, another regulation at the time was that the commander of U.S. Forces Afghanistan wanted to see battle space owners. That was our mission. We were what's called a battle space owner, meaning that we were the military unit in charge of our area of operations. We were we owned that chunk of the battlefield. And if you entered or exited, you had to tell us about it. We had overall say over what happened in our area. Did it always work out like that? Nah, not really. There were some people who were better connected and would pop in and out of our area really without telling us, which was sometimes problematic. But the point was that we were expected to be, fighting the war in its totality in our assigned area. And for me, that was at first it was 6 provinces, and then after the surge in 2010, it dropped to 3, which was probably for the best. We weren't really going to be able to be effective across 6 districts. Excuse me, 6 provinces. Yeah, that's like half the war. No, across 6 districts, and then it later dropped to just 3 districts, 2 of which were really strategically important and 1 less so. And so what we would do is the regulation was you have to put out 10 combat patrols a week and per platoon, right? So that's pretty easy. That's 5 days a week. a daily patrol basically. And then they also required an overnight mission, so 24 to 48 hours of continuous pseudo continuous operations. We would continuously be outside the wire, but we couldn't operate any faster than the Afghans. And ultimately, like, if the Afghan army or Afghan police or Afghan border police didn't want to patrol at 2 a.m., then like the patrol just wasn't going to happen. So, you know, the op tempo was sort of dictated by the host nation forces. So, typically we would do something like, we would probably do, I would say, 2 days of like base defense per platoon, or per squad, right? Because we also had it so that our fob could be defended by basically one 16-man maneuver element. And so, you would do about 2 days where that was your mission. You would do, obviously, another 5 with combat patrols, and the mix would vary, right? Some weeks would be really base defense heavy, some days would be really patrol heavy, and you know, the 10 was, we always hit our metric of 10 with, you know, some of them coming during these 24-hour missions, but we would usually finagle it, right? We'd almost always have to finagle it somehow, right? There was always something we had to cover for someone else. Oh, you also would do 1 day of QRF. You would be the designated quick reaction force. So you had to be ready to go at a moment's notice, and you would be sort of like on call. So your vehicles had to be ready. You would pre-submit your patrol plans. And so you quickly see that there are a lot of different things pulling your troops in different directions. And this is sort of where you make your money as a platoon leader, is figuring out how to make all these missions in different ways at different times. So you could sit there, so there were type days where I was like, hey, this week we have so much base defense and we have so much QRF duty that in order to make our 10 patrols, we're literally going to do like 48 hours straight of just like the counterinsurgency equivalent of like a subathon, right? Just like 48 hours, and we're going to get like 6 patrols in, right? So that way 2 days and you've gotten most of the way to make a mission. But so it's hard to say that there was one typical patrol or one typical combat operation protocol, but here's sort of what it looked like in broad terms. So at the, we're going to say Sundays, they would say, hey, it's time to submit your patrol plan for the week. And I would sit there and I would basically select times at random. I would just pick them out and stick them on a calendar. And the reason I would do it completely at random is so that any enemy forces would struggle to lay ambushes for us, right? If they knew, for example, every day you left at 9 a.m. sharp and returned at 5 p.m., well, they would know that basically they want to plant an IED at about noon, and when you come back at 5, you'll run it over. And so to prevent that, you just have to totally randomly mix up the times you're going to patrol. The problem, of course, is that every patrol had to be joint. You had to do it with the Afghan army, the Afghan border patrol, or the Afghan police, or a combination of the three. And so you would give them an appropriate amount of notice usually, so sometimes a few hours, sometimes up to a day. Where we were, the Afghan army was the most reliable partner by far, which meant that they both needed the least help, right? So, but they were also the most available. So we could pick up the phone with 2 hours notice, and they would mount up in their trucks and send us a couple of, 6 to 8 guys that would be actually ready and willing to fight. The Afghan border police also were tough, but they were not interested in patrolling. And they were, they could definitely fight, but they preferred to do so in their fortified border patrol bases. And then the Afghan police were by far the most they were the most crooked and the least willing to go toe-to-toe with enemy forces. But they obviously needed the most help because they were the law enforcement for their districts, right? They were the arm of the government that regular Afghans were most likely to interact with. So it really was a problem that they were also the least professional and the least motivated. But obviously you would have to disclose to them with some level of notice when you wanted guys for a patrol. So you would set that schedule, right? You would consider when you were going to notify different elements or who you were going to do it with. Usually what you wouldn't do is give away your whole patrol schedule to the Afghans once you made it, right? You would want to keep it close hold. Again, in case that information leaked to the enemy, you don't want the enemy to be able to get your schedule 7 days ahead of time, right? It takes a long time sometimes to plan an operation, regardless of whose side you're on. And so the less lead time you can give them in the event your intel leaks, the better. Now, obviously you make this schedule and then you try to deconflict it with the other platoons, your other missions, the base defense stuff, right? And you add that onto your schedule and you push the patrols to the left or to the right in order to make sure you're achieving the other missions that are out for you, right? So you get that and then you produce basically a schedule for the week of what you intend to do. Now, obviously, any given day, any given moment, you can always get retasked. You can always get additional missions. Those range from, 12 hours notice, hey, you're going to be supporting a major DEA operation. You're going to be supporting the Navy SEALs or the SAS on some sort of high value target that they, it's real hush hush, and you're going to just have to, like, your orders are like, stage at this area. You'll expect to see X number of rotary wing aircraft enter an objective. If you get this call on the radio, proceed to this objective and turn your radios to this frequency. Like, it was really very like hush hush stuff and very, But for us, it usually just meant you had to go to this point, this random grid coordinate. You would camp out and just await orders. And we rarely ever got that, right? Rarely did things go so sideways. Actually, I don't think it ever happened. I don't think we ever saw one of those type of operations go sideways, which makes sense, right? They're very well planned. They're very well resourced, and we were there as just a just in case type deal. But, that doesn't mean you don't try to make a plan for your week. So that's what we would do. We would put that plan out, right? Usually once a week. Again, we'd have these 24-hour missions, and we would distribute that to the troops via the squad leaders, right? The squad leaders would make the individual plans for those maneuver elements. They would decide, hey, who is available, who needs, we tried to give our soldiers 1 day off a week, and that's a chance to just, decompress a little bit, take care of college courses, do correspondence courses. We want to give them a predictable schedule so they could tell their wife or kids or spouse or whoever that, hey, this is the time I'm going to call, make sure you guys are available, right? So you want to give them a predictable schedule. So the squad leaders would look and they would decide, okay, who's going to go on these individual patrols, who's going to be off on what days, and they would sort of start the logistical planning process around assigning like individual soldiers to individual missions. Now for me, what I would do is, you wake up the next day, okay, patrol leaves at this time. And I would walk back usually about 4 to 5 hours. And first thing I would do is wake up, I would get some food, I would get some coffee, I would shower. And then I would go into the TOC and I would get the latest intelligence update on the area we were going to go. And usually these were products produced at the battalion or brigade level, and they basically were functioning like a newspaper with really nice maps. They would give you all the latest confirmed and unconfirmed intelligence, and they would really help you understand what was the most up-to-date threat picture that you were facing. Right. While this was going on, my NCOs were doing things like checking the vehicles, getting them ready, getting the weapons ready, getting the soldiers ready. And the nice thing is, after about 2 months of being deployed, I knew this could happen with minimal supervision. At first, me and my platoon sergeant would stand there and like eyes on these guys as they did stuff, just to make sure that they knew what they were doing and that everyone wasn't cutting corners. And once I could trust my NCOs, the trust that my NCOs knew what my platoon sergeant's expectations were for vehicle maintenance, readiness, then we sort of let them let them run the show while we handled the higher level sort of intel and planning. Right. So while I was in the task force, I would do a last minute check to make sure there was no other hot missions coming up, maybe talk to the other platoon leaders to see what they had going on, talk to the XO to see if he was tracking anything, just any other relevant intelligence. Hey, is there going to be anyone else coming into the battle space? Are we going to have the battalion commander in the battle space, right? Because he would run around. Does the commander want to come out on this mission? Do we have any other personnel that would need to come down that, for example, we had a civil affairs team attached that sometimes would say, hey, you're going out to X district. We have a dam project there, and we really want to be able to put eyes on it. And we say, okay, we'll add you to the patrol manifest, right? But that has to go through me. We had a human intelligence team that we would work with. We actually had civilian specialists. So we had a representative from the USAID, the U.S. aid organization, that would basically was doing accountability for aid distribution. And so he had key sites that he would want to visit. We would have a representative from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, believe it or not, because our district was so rural and the U.S. provided so much agrarian support, right, support to those rural farmers, that they had an agriculture specialist who would want to come out and liaise with these farmers. So if he had business going on there, we had civilian justice representatives meant to help build up the Afghan court system that would come out with us. We would have private military contractors, actually, like usually former police, former SWAT and detectives and high-level police that were assigned, ostensibly, they were assigned to every battle space owner to provide policing expertise, but because we were already like pretty experienced law enforcement, we were a military police unit, we didn't need their particular expertise, but they were so good to have as just extra gun toters, right? Again, 16 people minimum, they got to count toward it. So you would be able to sit there and give one of your people an extra day off, right? And they were happy to come out there and, do work, right? And they were great guys, right? They fit right in, obviously, because there was a lot of cultural similarities, and they were honestly great to have. They were a great asset. So, right, you would have all these other sort of enablers, is what they are sometimes referred to as, that would want to come on the patrol or not, and they would have to go through you, and you would check to see if it was going to like jeopardize your mission. Usually the answer was no, and my rule was always, the more people think well of you and think that you play nice, the more allies you have when navigating the complex military bureaucracy. So I would almost always try to find these guys a seat on my patrol unless we were completely maxed out. So we would do that, right? And we would get the latest intel brief, and then I would usually go out and supervise the last phases of getting the trucks ready to go. Now, at this point, early in the deployment, right, within the first like 90 days or so, you would have I or my platoon sergeant or the squad leader would give the patrol brief. And my patrol briefs were based around the Army's 5-paragraph operations order. This is the doctrinal Army way and the DoD way to plan an operation. And it's very flexible, right? So we wouldn't cover everything, but we would cover the things that you would need to know when, conducting a patrol. This would be things like the latest intelligence update. So they would talk about the situation, right? Where we were going, what the enemy was doing, what friendlies were around. You would talk about your mission. So you would talk about who you were, right? What you were doing, where you were going, when you were going to go there, and why, right? What was the ultimate purpose? And you would obviously emphasize that, and that was important for every single member of that patrol to know, because in the event something happened, right, you could have, and again, it could be an IED blast, literally, producing casualties, making myself or my squad leader a casualty, and that team leader has to step up. It could be something silly, like I eat some bad goat and I am vomiting uncontrollably, and the squad leader and team leader have to take the show back. My team leaders were experienced, and I would consult them on patrols, right? If there was something where I was like, hey, we can stop here, we can push on, what do you guys think, right? And I value their input. So giving them that level of situational awareness helped them make decisions independently and helped us be more informed and have more resilience in our command and control. So then we would, of course, break down the plan itself, right? We would talk about, okay, we're going to be going from here to here to here. We're going to talk to these people. We're going to ask these questions. We're going to visit this site and that site and the other site, this village, that village. We're going to talk to these people. We're going to ask these questions, right? Give them sort of the operational plan step by step as to how the patrol is going to go. Then, of course, the last two are going to be things like logistics. So for us, we did have a standard set of logistical things that we expected for every single patrol. Right? These were things like 48 hours worth of water, so usually just throwing cases of water in the back. We would have a case of MREs so that you could, again, eat 3 meals, right? Which in a pinch could carry you they could carry you for up to 2 days. You would have spare batteries for your night vision, spare batteries for your radios. We also expected them to have some emergency equipment. That would be things like a VS-17 panel, smoke grenades that you could signal a helicopter if your radios were down, and some other stuff like very, very high-end medical kits. We would expect them to have, a certain sets of like backups for radios. We wanted to make sure they had a SATCOM radio on every patrol, etc. And so, we would review that. We would review the comms plan, right? How you're going to talk to each other. And usually the comms plan was like 4 deep. So you would have a primary, a secondary, an alternate, and an emergency way of communicating. You would, of course, talk about then the logistics and resupply plan, right? What we would do, how we would receive medical care, right? What we would do if we took casualties. And usually that would be if we were close to the fob, we'd say, hey, it's going to be faster to drive any casualties right back to our fob, and on our way back we're going to call a 9 line to meet us there. If we were further out, we would designate a landing zone, usually near an Afghan security forces base, since we could be relatively sure that was going to be a secure area. We would talk about a fires plan, what to do if we needed to call for fire support. Usually that was aircraft, right? We would talk about what frequencies we would find them on, and how we would actually reach out, usually through our FOB, which had a TOC, a Tactical Operations Center, that could kind of do some of that higher level coordination for us. We would just talk about how, a lot of those things are just in case, right? What to do logistically, what to do communications wise, what to do as far as if you need to call for fire. And then we would do our checks, right? These are called PCCs, PCIs. And these were checks on both knowledge, right? So that would usually be something like, hey, soldier, what do you do if you take small arms fire? And they would say, I'm going to, get low in my turret. I'm going to find a distance and direction. I'm going to return fire, and I'm going to call out the distance and direction so that the other units know, right? What do you do if you get hit with an IED? We're going to stop the convoy. We're going to look outside to our 5s and 25s, get on the radio and see if there's casualties, and, we are going to push on if we can, and if we can't, we're going to hook up with the vehicle and do recovery operations. We talk through what we will do in different situations. And these are essential because you want your patrol, right, to not need specific detailed directions in response to common events, right? In combat, you rarely have control of the first, I'm going to say 5-ish minutes, right? The first 5-ish minutes are going to be you trying to figure out what exactly has gone on. Maybe not 5, right? Up to 5 minutes, I'll say. Sometimes it's very easy. You hear a pop. Someone goes, hey, we've been hit with an ID. You go, who is we? They go, oh, truck 4. You go, Roger. do you have any casualties, right? So you're like a minute, 2 minutes before you go, okay, we have control of this. I can start to command my troops. But again, you want to make sure everyone knows what to do on autopilot for those first 2 minutes, because those are the make or break. And so you do rehearse. What do you do if X happens? And I think those, repeating them again and again and again ad nauseum, is essential for soldiers to know their role in, when it counts. So those are PCCs, right? Pre-combat checks. Pre-combat inspections, PCIs, refer to the inspecting of gear, right? And I expect my team leaders to check the individual soldier gear. I expect my team leaders to check that they have working night vision devices, that my soldiers have working radios, that my soldiers have properly maintained their weapons, right? That is NCO business. And while I'll occasionally check in on it, most of what I do is actually going to be what I view as mission critical items inspected. So I will sit there and go, hey, I want to see a tow bar, right? So we can do vehicle recovery, because that is at the platoon level, that would be a item that could fail the mission of the platoon, right? I want to see our smoke grenades and VS-17 panels. I want to do the SATCOM radio check, right? I want to verify that the satellite SATCOM works. And all that are things that you absolutely want to be on top of, because as a platoon, you want to make sure your platoon has the things it needs to succeed. I need to trust and occasionally verify, but usually you'll find out you will figure out pretty quickly if a squad leader, for example, hasn't actually refilled the cases of water, right? You'll see it in the vehicles. You'll be like, why is there 2 bottles of water left in your vehicle? I never really had that happen. I would sometimes catch people slipping on personal protective gear, but only honestly because the regulations were pretty draconian as far as protective gear, and we would get in trouble for all sorts of We got in trouble for meeting with Afghans and putting our safety glasses up on our heads when talking to people. We took a photo with somebody's inside an Afghan, friendly Afghan police station, with the safety goggles or safety glasses up, and the ballistic glasses up. And man, we were getting calls from our battalion sergeant major about it, and that drove me bananas. I was like, listen, there's no evidence that we're doing the wrong thing. We just want to look someone in the eye when we talk to them. And yeah, so those sort of individual gear questions, I expected team leaders and squad leaders to be on top of that. And when they made mistakes, for me, it was pretty rare. There was a few occasions where squad leaders didn't check something they really should have checked. And you know what? We put them in line, right? We expressed our displeasure. We could counsel them. Sometimes if they were good, you would just have to pull them aside and be like, what the hell, man? No, you screwed this up. And usually good NCOs are going to listen, right? They're going to be like, hey, I'm sorry. I just lost focus. And you're like, again, you learn as a leader the difference between a good squad leader slipped up today a little bit, and someone is chronically too lazy and might not be cut out for the job. And I've done that, fired 4 squad leaders in my basically 2 years as a platoon leader. So absolutely not an uncommon occurrence. Right? Leadership is tough. It's not for everybody. And yeah, so anyway, we would do our PCCs, do our PCIs, and then finally we would mount up in the vehicles, right? I would usually take the vehicle that I felt like for that mission was the best vehicle for me. And usually I'm going to say more than half the time that was the lead vehicle, because I felt like I had studied the satellite imagery. That was part of sort of that intel update, is that I would review the best satellite imagery of our route. And, I would want to be in the lead so I could kind of lead the ducklings. And it was also me assuming a level of risk, right? Because if you're talking about an anti-tank mine type IED, the lead vehicle would roll over that. And if it was along a route that was tried and true, that we knew inside and out, I would usually prefer to be in the middle. That would let me kind of see all the elements. Sometimes I would even like prefer to be in the rear if we were going to, for example, sometimes our operational plan would be to actually basically do a drop off. The vehicles would drop off this dismounted element, let's say outside of an Afghan district center. And then our dismounts would go in, and the vehicles would keep rolling, and they would circle the perimeter and establish their security perimeter for us. And again, so if that was the case, then I might want to be the fourth person, the last person out of the vehicle getting to the district center, so that I could make sure that the vehicles were properly getting into formation before I went in and did the key leader engagement. So there's all sorts of different calls about where you want to be in your patrol. There's no one right answer. But with experience, you start to, you start to look ahead, right? And the nice thing about this 10 patrol schedule a week, while it was grueling, what it really did do well for you is that it enabled you to like get better, right? It was just like playing a video game on the same maps over and over and over again, right? As you do it over time, you start to communicate, you start to know where the tight spots are, the problems, and suddenly things that seemed really complicated, like really complex strategies, start to seem very simple, So I would sit there and go, oh, of course, we're going to the Nazion District Center. You're like, okay, I know exactly how this is going to go. I'm going to be in the fourth vehicle because that's the last vehicle to enter. It's the northwest corner that it takes, and I hop right off, and the entrance is right there, and you just know, right? You just know how this is all going to play out. And that's sort of the advantage of being a battle space owner, that you're always operating in the same AO. You know it inside and out, and you get to learn sort of what's out there. So again, you would go on your patrol. You would achieve whatever objectives you were set out to do, or you wouldn't, right? Or things would go sideways. And then you would come back, right? You would return. You would do a sort of post check on your vehicles. I expect my team leads to do a post check on their vehicle, right? Team lead NCOs, they own that vehicle top to bottom. And I expect them to like bring any issues with the vehicle or with the team's weapons to the armorer or mechanics. MPs have attached mechanics. For me, I would usually do an AAR, an after action report. We would just quick chat about, what went well, what we could do better next time, just to sort of think about those things. I would go in usually sometimes with a squad leader or with a scribe. I would have sometimes soldiers or young NCOs be sort of like the co-interviewer when I would talk to key leaders like the Afghan police chiefs or Afghan governors, district governors. And so I would sit down with the kind of note taker, and we would do the intel debrief, right? So we would write up everything that happened in the patrol, every piece of intelligence we learned, every interview we did, and we would send it to my company commander, to our operations cell. They would look it over, make sure we had answered any questions, that we hadn't left any sort of details unanswered. And then we would send it up to our battalion intelligence, who would then process that write-up. Meanwhile, while I was doing that, the rest of the patrol would usually use that time to do their physical training, right? And we were never like doing push-ups or yelling, but the rule was, hey, you guys got to do some exercise. And so sometimes it would be like a little bit of running, maybe a little bit of push-ups and sit-ups, and then like play some volleyball or have a flag football game or go on a run around the FOB perimeter a million times, right? Whatever it was, as long as, for me, it was like you want your soldiers to maintain physical fitness, but you can't go so hard that they get like broken off. You know what I mean? Like you don't want to train so hard that the next day you're like, oh, I can barely walk. It's like, well, no, I need you to walk, man. But you want to make sure that they're maintaining that physical fitness, and it's just a good way to get out some of your energy, right? Patrolling is weird, especially mounted patrolling, because you're driving, your body isn't burning calories, but your anxiety level can be pretty high. And so you sort of have to like realign that, right? And I think some exercise is just good for the psyche. After that, of course, soldiers will go, shower, get something to eat, refit, again, try to deal with any issues involving, vehicles, weapons, but also personnel, right? If you're doing correspondence courses, if you have, you're feeling a little under the weather, you talk to the medic, you call your friends and family, right? Decompress a little bit, right? Soldiers there was some ongoing poker games played for, meaningless chips, or played for packets of cookies or something, or bougie energy drinks, right? There was always something to try to keep soldiers sort of busy, right? Because nothing sucks worse than being deployed and just sitting around in your little like hovel hut, just being bored, right? That's just a recipe to not feel good. So it's just sort of like you got to find that balance between working hard and not feeling like you're getting burnt out. Because again, a 12-month deployment is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And you have to take care of soldiers. Like soldiers are going to be focused. You got to keep them highly focused. And that means not being burnt out. So just like professional athletes, right? The playoffs are hard, not because they are high stakes, so they are. It's because it's hard because the schedule is so grueling, and you have to take time to like rest and refit psychologically between these sort of high stakes events. And it's important to try to give soldiers the time to do that. Okay, guys, wow, I am like coming up on 40 minutes. So, yeah, let me know in the comments if you guys have other questions about what it's like to be deployed, what sort of routine things do I not think about that you guys want answered. Definitely let me know in the comments. Also, if there's any guests you want me to have on, I'm all about it. And until next time, I'll see you guys later.